Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever WaterWise Landscape Design webinar. Today, we will be covering some basic tips and tricks to help you have a WaterWise landscape. Usually we offer these classes at our office at the Xeriscape Demonstration Garden or WaterWise Demonstration Garden off of Mesa Road. But due to the current situation, we wanted to find a way that we could provide you this content, give you some information to help you feel inspired, to allow you to have a great WaterWise landscape while you might have this time on your hands. So with this, my coworker, Catherine Moravec, will be joining us today. She's going to field all of the questions that you might have. So throughout the presentation, if you have a question, on the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a bar that you can type it in and submit it. And then when we get to a question slide, I'll actually go ahead and Catherine's going to feed me those questions and we'll get through as many as possible. We have a lot of content to cover today, so bear with us. We might not be able to get to all of the questions, but we're really going to try hard. With that, let's begin. So this is me. My name is Lisa Pace, and I'm a Senior Water Conservation Specialist. I've been at utilities now for about 7 years, and my job is really all about helping customers have successful landscapes while using water wisely. I have my bachelor's degree from Colorado State University in landscape horticulture with a concentration in design and contracting, and I've been in the landscape industry for more than 20 years. 7 of those years I actually spent as a landscape designer and installer right in Colorado Springs. So I've seen a lot of different sites. We have a lot of unique areas in Colorado Springs. So if you have some really tough questions, I'd love to hear them today. And I hope that I can answer those for you. I also received my Master Gardener certificate, and I'm a landscape technician. I'm a certified landscape technician, and I'm a certified landscape irrigation auditor. So I've done everything from the person out in the field planting those annual flowers to the person at the desk creating those complex plans on CAD, to the person who comes back and evaluates your irrigation system to see what you can do to water more efficiently. And I'm going to take all that knowledge, all that experience I have today, and try to help you succeed with your own landscape at home. So to begin, what is a WaterWise landscape? Well, a WaterWise landscape is really an approach to landscaping based off of landscaping techniques, watering efficiently, and design choices that help create a livable, efficient, and resilient landscape. Why is it important to have a WaterWise landscape? Well, here in Colorado Springs, we live in a semi-arid climate, and our landscapes to perform the way we want them to, they need some additional water. Historically, we only get about 16 inches of precipitation a year. And if you're trying to grow something like Kentucky bluegrass, it requires more like 40 inches of water a year. So we have to supplement those plants with water. How much water? Well, our residential homes, if you took their total combined water use for the year, about 35% of that is what actually goes to the landscape. You might think, wow, that's a large amount. And it is. It's the biggest piece of the pie. However, our landscapes really do add a lot of value to our lives. They're great for our community. And those landscapes need some water. So it's okay to use water in the landscape. We just want to be able to do it efficiently and really show that we're not attributing to water waste. So that being said, this year, Colorado Springs Utility has adopted some new WaterWise rules. There are 6 rules. 4 of them pertain to irrigation or how we use water in our sprinkler system. 2 of them about how we wash things outdoors. So the very first one is run sprinklers no more than 3 days a week. At 3 days a week, your grass can really do very well. And when I say 3 days a week, I'm saying the heat of the summer is when you want to be watering that much. In the spring and the fall, you should really only be watering 1 to 2 days a week. So change the number of days as we go through the season, but water no more than 3 days a week. Now, from May 1st to October 15th, run sprinklers before 10 a.m. or after 6 p.m. Don't run them in the middle of the day. They are less efficient. That water is going to evaporate. It could blow away easier. So it's better to water in the early morning hours or the late evening hours. Now, this time of year in April, because it's so cold, you really can't water during the middle of the night because it's going to freeze. So during April or after October 15th, it's completely fine to water your landscape during the middle of the day with those sprinklers that throw water into the air. Next, don't let water pool or flow across the ground. So this really pertains to, an area that you're applying water so fast that it tends to run off. There are irrigation scheduling techniques you can do, like cycle and soak, that will allow that water to be more effective. But we see runoff occur a lot, and that's when you have that water that runs down that gutter or pools on your patio, and that is really water waste. So this rule is really let's just decrease the amount of water that's not being used for beneficial use to our landscape. Next, if you have a leak, fix it within 10 days. Sprinkler systems, it might be really hard to know if you have a leak. So turn them on while you're at home, check them. You can do irrigation maintenance during the middle of the day when you can check them, and look for any leaks or problems that you have. I recommend doing that at least once a month. If you find a leak, fix it, because those leaks, again, are wasted water, and that's water that you're paying for. Next, if you're washing your vehicle or other equipment outside, use a hose with a positive shutoff nozzle. Now, what that means is that when you let go of that nozzle, it's going to turn off by itself. So if you've got a phone call or you've got to go in the house to go grab a sponge, you can put that hose down on the ground, let go of that nozzle, and it will turn off. It won't keep running and let that water pool and flow and be wasted. The last rule is about cleaning our outdoor surfaces. So if you have a patio or a sidewalk and you have some dirt on it, go ahead and grab a broom or a blower. Use those mechanical means to remove any debris that is not related to a public health or safety issue. If your kid spills their juice all over the front patio or your back patio, or like at my daughter's school, if I had a flock of geese move through across the sidewalk, those are reasons that you're going to want to use water to clean those surfaces, and that is a matter of public health and safety. So that's when it's okay. But other than that, grab a broom or a blower. Next, if you're attending this class, it is likely that you are looking at doing some type of landscape improvement. And to be able to water those plants, and this is pertaining to overhead irrigation, so heads that pop up and spray water into the air. If you're going to be using that type of irrigation, you're going to need to get an establishment permit. An establishment permit is a temporary watering permit for new sod, seed, or plants that allows you to water more than 3 days a week, again with the pop-up system, and allows you to water during the day when sprinklers are normally allowed. Who should apply? Anyone who's using sprinklers to water their new grass sod, seed, or landscape plants. So in this picture here, you see that little pop-up head and water that sprays out. That's called a spray head. So that's one of the heads that is spraying the water into the air. There's also heads that pop up and have a single stream and move. Those are called rotor heads. Those are also spraying water into the air. And so those would also kind of fall into this category. Now, if you're installing new plants and not using this kind of system, you actually don't have to get an establishment permit. It's not needed if you're doing drip irrigation or watering with a hose that has a shut-off nozzle, or maybe you're using a watering can. If you're watering your plants by those three methods, you actually don't need to get one. So how do we apply? Well, beginning May 1st, we can apply online at csu.org. It's a really simple form you fill out, attach some receipts if you need them, and email them, and it gets sent right to us. If you have more questions or need more information, you are welcome to contact us at estp@csu.org, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. So does living in this really arid environment and using a lot of water for the outdoors, and having these rules mean that I can't have a landscape. Absolutely not. You can have a beautiful landscape while using water wisely. This is actually my backyard. At my old house, I lived over by Cottonwood Creek or Cottonwood Park. And you can see you can have a lush, beautiful, vibrant garden, backyard, living space while using water wisely. So now let's look at the plan basics. This is where we're really going to begin to see how we can develop a plan. So often people want to jump right to the end. They want to talk about plants. I think that's where you begin, but it's not. You actually have to begin by looking at your site. So the first thing I want you to do is to get an image. If you're doing your backyard or you're working on your front yard, get an image. Go to Google and type in your address and go to the maps and go to a satellite view, and then screen grab that image and print it off on a piece of paper. Another site that I found works really well is Bing. They have what's called a aerial or bird's eye view, and those images I find are actually a little bit clearer, a little better quality than the Google image. So you can get a nice image like you see here, print it off as big as you can, and then go to a window. This is going to feel a little bit like your fifth grader's homework assignment that you're working on with them this week. But you want to go to the window and use this to trace your site. Get a blank piece of paper, trace over anything that you want to keep. So your house, your property lines, retaining walls, plants, your patio, a shed, anything that you want to, that's going to stay in this space, you want to trace it on your paper. This is going to give you a really simple, proportionate plan to work from. And even when I first meet with somebody, I tend to go this route first. I draw out their space just in this really simple line form. And then I measure a couple hard lines. So on the back of the property, I know that this fence line is 50 feet. It's 50 feet to one corner to the other. So I know if there was anything that I needed to draw that was 50 feet, this would be the distance. I'm also going to measure the back of the house because that's a very clear line that I can see. And I see that it's 35 feet wide. Next, I'm going to find something smaller. In my backyard, I had horseshoe pits. And I know that those horseshoe pits are 5 feet wide. So if I wanted to draw a shrub on this plan, when I get to the planting phase, I'm going to draw it the same size as that horseshoe pit. And if I need to draw a 10-foot plant, I'm going to draw it double the size of that horseshoe pit. And if I need a shade tree that's 25 feet wide, I'm going to use that back property line or fence measurement, and I'm going to make my circle 25 feet wide. Is this a perfect scaled drawing? Absolutely not, but it'll give you something to work from. If you're working on a much smaller space, go ahead and measure it and draw it out as closely as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but starting with something that can show that visual space is really important. Next, we want to look at site features. This is where you start to look at what is existing in this site and how do I need to adjust my plan to have a successful plan based on my current conditions. So how much sun do I have? Where is that sun located? Full sun is really considered an area that gets 6 to 8 hours a day. Part sun is 3 to 6, and shade is less than 3 hours a day. So literally walk outside, and I will tell you, walk out there at different times of the day and start to draw where you have shade, where you have sun. You also have to keep in mind that right now we are in spring, and as we move into summer, that sun is going to get higher into the sky. And so areas that have some shade right now might actually turn into either part sun or possibly even some full sun areas when we hit the middle of summer. So write down what areas are full sun, part sun, and shade on your plan. Also look at the slope. Do you have any slope in your yard? Working with new construction, it was something we always dealt with. The finished floor elevation of the house was always about 3 feet above the road. There's usually a swale that goes around the backyard and exits along the property line. Mark down where you have slope and what degree that slope is. Is it slight? In my head, this is where you can put down like a small ball on the ground, and it may want to roll, but it's not going to really move on you. So this really 0 to 10 degrees was what I think of in terms of slight slope. Moderate slope is you put that ball down and it's going to move, and it's going to move to the lowest point. That's a moderate slope. At moderate slope, you're really going to want to start thinking about, do I really want to have grass on that slope? That's going to be pretty hard to maintain. High slope is extremely hard to grow grass on, and is something that might even be a challenge to walk up. So the ball is absolutely going to roll down that hill, and you might too if you try to catch it. So next, we want to think about that water. If we have this slope, we probably have some swales, some drainage areas where the water is moving. Where does that water go? Where are your downspouts? Do you have black corrugated pipes attached to them? Where do they come out of the ground? Do they still work? From experience, I can tell you those black pipes oftentimes become clogged. And what we would do as a contractor, if we were going out to check those pipes, we would actually stick a hose. We would disconnect it from the downspout, and then we would stick the hose inside that pipe and find out where it daylighted. Where did it come out of the ground? Does it come out of the ground? Do you need to fix some of that drainage issues that you might have? Because ultimately, you don't want to put your fire pit right in the middle of your drainage area, your swale, and you don't want to block that drainage. Many times I've gone to a site and saw where somebody built a retaining wall or put in a berm and blocked that water from exiting the property. And then, unfortunately, those sites did have problems at times where that water actually backed into their house through like a window well. So this green box that just popped up, this is a good time to start asking a question if you haven't already. This is letting you know that we're going to have a question slide coming up shortly. So if you have any questions so far, please start to enter those. I can't wait to hear them. Next, I want you to think about your views. Are there any views you want to keep or hide? Pikes Peak is a big deal here in Colorado Springs. So if you have a view of Pikes Peak, you're going to want to keep it. But you may also have some views of maybe some windows in a neighbor's house that you don't want to keep. Mark those things down on your plan and think about what size of plant you might need. It's also a good idea to walk inside your house and look out major windows. Inside your house, you might be 3 feet above your backyard. So that height of that shrub that you might need to block something may be bigger than you think. Walk inside your house into this space and look for those views that you want to keep and hide and write them down. Next, I want you to evaluate your soil. And the easiest way to evaluate your soil, in my opinion, is to do a ribbon test. If we were in the class right now, I would ask for 4 volunteers to come on up and get their hands dirty. And what we would do is we'd have 4 different samples of soil. Just get some soil from your backyard, dig down about 6 inches deep and collect it, put it in a container. Now, put some of that soil into your hand and add water. You mush up that soil in your hand and you try to create a ribbon. And based on the length of that ribbon, it'll tell you what type of soil structure you have. So this right here is a YouTube video that's a minute long and basically shows you step by step how to do that. But that is a great way to have a basic understanding as to what type of soil that you have in your yard. You may decide you don't need to amend your soil, especially if you're doing things like a native turf or native or well-adapted plants. Those types of plants don't need a lot of organic matter, so you may not have to amend what's already there, which is fantastic. But you will likely need to amend if you're planning on doing like a cool season lawn like Kentucky bluegrass or tall fescue or fine fescue. Those plants are going to do better and actually save about 25% of the water used if you amend that soil. Non-native plants are also going to perform better if they have more organic matter in the soil. And vegetables, well, if you're a vegetable gardener, you really need to start out with the best soil you can find. So I'm not even talking about kind of amending your soil at that point. I'm going to be speaking more towards making a raised bed and importing soil for that. Next, Always check for compaction. Compaction is #1 issue when it comes to soil. And if you don't do it at the beginning of the project, you can't really fix it later. So one of the ways that you can test for compaction is you get a screwdriver or a shovel and you go outside. Now you need that area to be moist and you want it to, maybe it rained last night or your irrigation system ran last night. Now you can go out and check for compaction. So you go up to your space and you try to stick that screwdriver in the ground. Was it easy to push in, or did you need to step on it or maybe even jump on that shovel to get it to move? If it's the later, you have a compaction issue and you have to figure out a way to loosen up that soil. In this picture, you see one of our great volunteers. This is Stan. Stan is actually turning over the soil. This is at the demonstration garden and you can see how stuck together that soil was. So we had to go through and turn all of it. This was an area we brought soil amendments in, and then we actually rototilled it. And adding that air back into the soil is going to help your plants perform better. So now you have all this great information about your site. You know how big your space is. Make sure you record all of it. Write all of these site features down. They are so easy to forget. I can't tell you how many times I was at a site and I might have been looking at a slope and I was trying to estimate, how high that slope really was. Or I went inside to look through a window and estimate how tall a shrub needed to be to block something. And I didn't write it down and I forgot it. And I had to go back again and get that information later. So write all that information down. It's going to help you succeed in the end. Questions. So Catherine, this is the time that if you have any questions, feel free to feed them in to me.
Okay, sounds good, Lisa. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. We do have a few questions here. I'm going to choose 3 to give to you. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and show you in your video so that people can see where you are, and maybe you can use your drawing pad if you need to.
Hi everyone.
Okay, so there's Lisa. So our first question is from Sheba, and it says, we have water flowing through our yard coming out of our sump pump drainage as there's a stream running below the house. It has caused furrows in the yard. How do we handle that? And I have 2 more after this question for you.
Okay, so something I like to do with drainage, especially if I'm talking about a lot of water moving through a space, is I actually like to, if I have erosion issues, I'm going to either A, help solve those erosion issues by putting specific plants in that area that will help with that erosion, or B, I'm going to look to rock. So with downspouts that have a heavy flow, they cover a large percentage of the roof. Those areas, I'm going to put rock at the end of those downspouts. My plants, when I first plant them, aren't going to be big enough to withstand that amount of water moving through. They're not going to have the root system to hold that soil in place. So I need something else to help with that. So let's say that this is, we're going to draw it this way. This is our house, and here is our downspout. At the base of this downspout, and you do want it to be a good 3 feet or more away from the house, this is where I would start to install some rock. Now, in your case, this is a sump pump. So you have a drain from a sump pump, and that's where the water is coming out. You're going to want to put the rock there. And with that, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to slow the water. I'm going to spread the water so that it can sink into the ground. To do this, I would create kind of the swale, and in the swale, it's going to be zigzaggy. It's going to give that water a longer distance to travel, and it's going to create some dips and some bends along the way to help slow it down. So this is my path that the water is going to travel. And then I'm actually going to start to also create some little pools in this space. And these little pools are just slight depressions where that water can collect, spread, and sink. So if you have a large flow or volume of water, you can use this method to help reduce erosion, but also give the landscape maybe a little extra water. Because now next to these pools, guess what? I'm going to start to plant something that may like a little more additional water. Like, for example, you know, a dogwood is a plant that really lives in some of those kind of boggy conditions. So this could be your chance to grow plants that actually require a little bit more water without having to water them. All right, Catherine, next question.
Okay, sounds great. We have a second question that maybe you will answer later, so you could defer this one if you want. But the question is from Bethany, and it says, what is the best grass seed that is soft for kids but doesn't require tons of water? Have you ever used zoysia grass successfully in Colorado?
Oh, let's talk about that one when I show you a front yard example. I've got a great front yard example that is beautiful, but has some complications. So we'll get to that one.
Okay, this one is another plant question, so you may want to defer this one as well. It's from Kathy, and it says, what are the best attractive combinations of water-wise deer-resistant plants I could use in my landscaping around my house, which is part sun?
Ooh, part sun is the challenge there. We will get into plant combinations. And Catherine, if I don't specifically hit on that one, remind me. But I think we're going to get there because we're going to talk about light requirements, water requirements. Do the plants need to be deer proof in just a little bit?
Okay, sounds good. And one more, and just so you're aware, Lisa, it's 9:30. So I'm going to give you one more question from Lance, which says, and this is our last one, is it too early to plant new sod or grass seed? I'm not sure if the soil temperatures are warm enough for the grass species I want to install.
Ooh, okay, so there's kind of two questions there. The very first one is, can I start planting? And I would say that depends on the plant. If you go to the nursery and you buy something that's coming out of dormancy and it's outside, I would say those are fine to plant. If you're going into a garden facility and these plants are big and beautiful and totally leafed out, the chances are those were grown in a greenhouse. And if you throw them outside right now, they might not react well to this cold front that we have moving in as we speak. As for grass species, there are definitely some that you're going to want to plant when it's much warmer out, like around the 4th of July. And then there's cool season grasses that now is a good time to start to overseed. But we can cover those when we get to the grass selection as well.
Okay, Lisa, so that wraps up this particular question section, and I'm going to send it back to the presentation.
All right, sounds great. Okay, so moving on. Now that we know what our site needs are, we know that the space that we have, we got to start to come up with our goals. What are the things we want to achieve in this space? Are we looking for increased curb appeal? Are we just trying to add some pizzazz or color? You might find yourself stuck at home a lot right now. I know I feel that way. And I feel like I have a lot of time on my hands. And so I'm starting to think of all the projects I want to get done, and being outside with my 2-year-old and my 5-year-old seems like a great way to entertain them and give me something that I can do. So now that you know, or you've started to think about what your goals are, let's talk about how you're going to use this space. What do you want to do in this space? Do you need a yard for your kids to play in? So here's that yard I mentioned. This is actually Scott Winter. This is his front yard. He's another horticulturalist at our facility, and his front yard is it's a buffalo grass. This is Sundancer buffalo. Now, if you have heavy foot traffic, this is not a grass for you. If your kids are out there occasionally, kind of walking around, maybe having a picnic, this grass is going to handle that fine. But if you're having heavy foot traffic, like a backyard, or let's say all the neighborhood's kids come to your front yard to play, then unfortunately, the best grass for you, in my opinion, is going to be a Kentucky bluegrass. Zoysia grass, I think there's one out there called Dogtuff, is something we have tried. We have it at the garden right now growing. And my concern with that grass right now is it's really invasive. It moves a lot. In fact, we planted it in the middle of the parking lot in an island bed, and it actually grew over top of the concrete and started growing into the gutter. So although it seems promising from a standing up to traffic and being lower water than Kentucky bluegrass, it has some real concerns when it comes to the invasiveness of it. So this grass here is Sundancer buffalo. It can be watered once a week. You don't even have to mow it. And if you don't have a lot of foot traffic, it could be a great solution for you. But if you have a foot traffic, I'm always going to go back to Kentucky bluegrass. It'll stand up to that traffic. And if you amend the soil ahead of time and water efficiently, you actually can really reduce the amount of irrigation it needs. Maybe in your space, you're going to want to entertain. You're going to have large groups of people over, or maybe you want a small spot for coffee, but start to write these things down. Lastly, maybe you want to do a vegetable garden, or for me, I just got chickens. I've wanted chickens for a long time, but now I need to find a space for them. So write down how you're going to use these spaces and when you're going to use them. If you're installing a patio that you want to have dinner on at night and it's south or west facing, you might need a shade structure or tree to help you enjoy that space better when that sun is blazing hot. How do you want it to look? Today, I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of WaterWise landscape, but ultimately, I would tell you, do some research. Get your phone, check out things like Pinterest and House, and just put in there WaterWise landscape. You're going to find some great pictures. Use those as inspiration, copy them, copy elements of them. You don't have to tell anybody that that's where you got the idea, but do some research and find examples that you like. We actually have a wonderful plant database called waterwiseplants.org, and that has a landscape gallery where you can see local landscapes, what people have done, like Scott's yard, that look amazing and can show you some real plants that are also in our database and help you have a successful WaterWise plan. So here we are with Scott's house. Now I'm going to say, what do you want your landscape to look like? WaterWise landscapes can be anything. They can be traditional like this, even though it has this native and really low water grass. I love buffalo grass. It does have some limitations. It's not going to green up to the heat of the summer, and then it's going to go dormant early as well. But I think it's a great alternative for a front yard if you're not constantly on it. You can also choose to go a little bit more wild or native Colorado and do something like this front yard. This is actually over in Pleasant Valley, and I think it's just beautiful the way that they have these plants that flow through the space, and it's very low water and also very low maintenance. Now, my favorite thing about this picture is actually the juxtaposition to the house just to the right of it. You can see a typical kind of 70s yard where it's a carpet of bluegrass. It's fence to fence, wall to wall. In this instance, they have a small planting bed next to their house. But other than that, they have this big yard and it's all grass. That yard takes a lot of maintenance and resources like water and fertilizer and weed killer to make it look that way. I would rather have a more natural landscape that still is adding beauty while using less resources. If you wanted to lower your maintenance, you could do something where you don't have any grass at all. Maybe you focus on using shrubs and grasses and a few perennials to fill up your space. Or if you're somebody who likes a lot of maintenance, you can choose to do a very elaborate perennial bed. This is actually the backyard of one of our volunteers. She lives just north of Canyon City, and I just think this landscape is absolutely beautiful. You can create something that feels very Southwest. Maybe that matches the architecture of your home, or you can create something that looks very traditional. The sky is the limit. Now we want to go back to our piece of paper. We want to start to organize our space. To begin, start with your largest spaces first. Start with things like your lounging area. If I was creating a patio space for somebody to maybe entertain, I'm going to start at minimum with 12 feet by 12 feet. This tends to be a space that you can put up furniture and still move around it freely. Too many times people made in a small patio and then it's very awkward to move around. And don't forget, you're going to need a pathway through this patio as well. If you're going to do a dining room, take the size of your table and add 3 feet to each side of it. So if it's 6 feet long, you add 3 feet to the front, 3 feet to the end, and now you need a 12-foot space. If it's 3 feet wide, you add 3 feet to one side, 3 feet to the other, and you know you need a 9-foot space. This is at minimum, start here, because this still allows you to pull out that chair and walk around it. But if you have a tight space, let's say right next to a wall or fence, you might even want to give yourself a little bit more room than that. Next, fire pits. Fire pits were something that I did a lot of. Here is one that's Colorado Springs homeowner, and they have this really nice fire pit kind of on their back hillside. This fire pit diameter is actually about 14 feet wide. And again, that's so you have room to move away from the fire as that fire progressively gets bigger throughout the night, and give yourself plenty of seating area for your guests to feel comfortable and then walk up and go get something. This is one that I did at a home and garden show. This one was actually only 9 feet wide, but you can see it has that fixed seating area, which is more limiting in terms of your walking space. So if you have a tight space, it's doable, but maybe consider something like this where you have a built-in section versus a lot of freestanding chairs. I will tell you one thing though, if you'd like to have big fires, having a built-in seat is probably not a good idea because it doesn't give your guests much room to move, especially if the smoke is blowing in that direction. Vegetable gardens. A raised vegetable garden is my preference. So I like my vegetable gardens to be 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. This allows you to get 2 by 6 by 8 foot lumber. And for those end pieces, you just cut it in half. It makes it really easy to build and install your own raised bed. I also like my raised beds to be anywhere from 18 to 30 inches. That's where I think it's easier to work in them because you're not scrunched down or hunched over on the ground all the time. So these vegetable beds here are actually only 1 timber high, so they're about 6 to 8 inches. But if you added a little bit more height to that, you can see it would be easier to actually work in and maintain that garden. Now, a tip for a small space. If you have a small space, I would tell you combine those areas together. You can actually get more stuff in a smaller space if you're sharing some of that walk around room. If the walk around your dining room table is the same walk around space in terms of your couch or lounge area, you can put more in a smaller space. And if you don't have that 4 foot by 8 foot area for that raised garden, think about doing it in pots. Pots are a great way to grow some vegetables, peppers, tomatoes. Those were things I love to grow in pots. So if you have a small space, you can still fit all this stuff in there. You're just going to get a little bit more creative and you're going to share those spaces. I also love this concept because I like to rearrange my furniture a lot. In my house, I do it at least once a quarter. In my landscape, I probably do it every year. But if you have those combined spaces, it actually allows you to move things around, maybe for a party that you're having. And it gives you one large space when you want it, or you can break it into those smaller spaces by your groupings. You're also going to want to create practical turf areas. So here's a picture of a front yard. Again, kind of a 70s build where we have this border of plants right next to the foundation of the house and everything else is turf grass. And this customer still wanted a little bit of green, but the only time they walked on their grass is when they mowed it. So if you only walk on your grass to mow it, we should find a different type of grass for you. And I would go with this one. Here we took that 2/3 grass was shrunk down to about 1/3 grass and 2/3 planting bed. And that grass area is actually blue grama. Now this house is up in Fort Collins, but you can see you can still do amazing plants in your front yard, especially if you don't dedicate all of it to turf grass. But if you're somebody that likes that little touch of green, this is a great way to still achieve that as well. Practical turf areas, if you have high slope, as I mentioned earlier, don't put turf there. It's hard to water, it's hard to mow, it's hard to maintain. Instead, make it a planting bed. Make it a space that is visually appealing and requires less resources. Practical turf areas, not here. Oftentimes I would find these really strange shapes of grass next to the road, in between a driveway or a sidewalk, and the microclimate in that area makes it such a challenge to keep that grass looking good. We need to get rid of that grass and do something that's more practical, like this planting bed. If you're not going to use that space as a play space for grass, find another way to do something that uses less water but is still going to add value to you. Practical turf areas. They don't have to be large. This is my backyard, and that PVC pipe that you see in the front and then towards the back fence there, that's actually covering the stakes for the horseshoe pits. And from stake to stake, it's 40 feet long, and that grass area is about 15 feet wide. So that square footage of that turf area is only 600 square feet. My lot was 7,500 square feet, and my backyard was 600, and that was enough for my 2 dogs and my 2 children. And in this space, we also leveled it so that we could, one, make it a more usable space to play with a ball, but 2, to make it easier to irrigate. Now we want to connect the spaces with pathways. So figure out how you're going to transition or move from one area to another. Do you want to do a flagstone stepper like this pathway here? These are pretty easy to install and quite affordable. Maybe you want more of a gravel path. A gravel path was, to me, a great way to create an access path to the backyard. It's low maintenance and very affordable. If you're going for a front entrance, maybe doing something more formal like this paver pathway could be a better idea for that. And lastly, again, if you have those high sloped areas, use retaining walls. Make those retaining walls break up your space into more manageable pieces and also help level your spaces to make it easier to irrigate. This is Scott's backyard, and I think it's just beautiful. This is what it looks like up top. Originally, he had this really massive slope that went right towards his house and actually kind of created some negative drainage. And so he pulled back that slope with these retaining walls, created a better drainage solution from his house, and actually gave him some great places to landscape. Now that our spaces are organized and defined, let's move on to what's next. So this picture kind of shows you when you're done drawing in all these different areas, if you were just to install the bare bones, the pathways, the walls, your irrigation, this is what it would look like. And then what really makes it work is by adding the plant material. That plant material is really what's going to make your landscape zing. It's the decorations in your house, it's the color of paint you put on the walls. The plants for the landscape are the window dressing. They are what make the space come alive. But before we go there, let's take a couple more questions. Catherine?
Okay, sounds good, Lisa. I'm going to change to your video here, and I think I have 2 really good questions here to kind of put a capstone on this section. The first one says, I have basically no landscaping, mostly dirt and weeds, and a huge backyard and front yard on a corner lot. Do you have any Yeah, huge space.
This is what I would want. Maybe not.
Right. So
okay.
Do you have any services or recommendations? Do you have any recommendations or services to help us get started with planning?
All right. So a few things I would say. First of all, think of your uses, write those down, and start to develop how big of spaces you might need. One easy trick is to do 1/3 living space like patios, fire pits, storage area, or utilitarian space, 1/3 grass, and 1/3 planting beds. It's an easy kind of composition to begin with a pretty straightforward layout. Now, that being said, if you're really truly a large corner lot, you could be talking, 15 to 20,000 square feet. And if you're that large, I'm actually going to tell you, think about doing some larger areas of native, like Scott's backyard. That native turf area in the back was beautiful. It only requires water once a week, and they mow it once a year. So if you really have a large lot and you want to minimize your maintenance as well as your water needs, look at using native grass in a large area. It's low cost to install, and it's the best bang for the buck if you have a large lot already and you need to reduce your turf grass. Going to a native grass is the best return on investment of any landscape decision you can make. And there are options out there that are truly beautiful. In terms of surfaces, if you're doing a patio, you could do rock. That's going to be your least expensive option. You can get a smaller rock, like 3/4 inch or less, or even a breeze. And that's going to be very affordable. If you want kind of a middle range, you're probably looking at concrete. Concrete can range anywhere from $4 or $5 a square foot up to $13 a square foot if you're doing stamped and colored. And at $13 a square foot, that's where you're getting into pavers as well as flagstone patio range. So those would be some options depending on what your budget and the space is in terms of square footage. Next one.
Okay, sounds good. The next question is from Devin, and Devin says, there is a space of about 3 to 4 feet between my house and the tall fence on the north side of my house, so it's quite shaded. We don't really use the space for anything, but we need to walk through the area to maintain the house. What could be planted in this area? It's just rock right now. Thanks.
Ooh, okay, 3 to 4 feet, full shade, and you need to walk through that. I'm not sure that you're going to find a plant that isn't going to take up that whole space. When it comes to full shade and low water, that is the hardest plant to find. So, you know, I don't have a perfect solution for you. I think having that be a walkway and then maybe using that tall fence to hang some artwork up on that side, that would maybe be how I would approach it. If I had a window that looked out there, I might put a couple pots and a picture or something on that fence, rather than try to create a pathway and a livable planting bed space. And in that 3 to 4 feet, I think is actually the biggest challenge.
Okay, that sounds great. So some places just are best to leave as utilitarian and maybe not try to landscape them.
Yeah, especially the sides of your house.
Okay, sounds good. And this is our last question for this section. It's from Sheba, and she says, what's your opinion on using fake grass?
Okay, so in general, we really recommend living landscapes. We want to create a healthy environment for our plants to grow and thrive. I have done some artificial turf applications. They were primarily related to like a putting area in someone's backyard. And I only ever did one that it was a small area where this particular homeowner only wanted to sit in his house and look outside and see green. He didn't want to interact with it at all. He just wanted to see it. So the problem with the installation methods related to putting in artificial turf, it's almost like you're prepping for a patio. You have to compact the ground, you have special subsurface fill you've got to bring in. And so if you have things like existing trees that have roots in those areas, it's not beneficial for all that other existing landscape around that space. And that's generally a big reason why I don't usually recommend it. It might be less water, but it doesn't help support a bigger overall livable landscape. All right, with that, we're going to keep going. This is probably the funnest part of the presentation. We're going to get into plant material. So let's get going. Let's start at looking at choosing the right plant. How do you choose the right plant? Well, to begin, you've got to choose the resilient plant. You got to choose a plant that's going to work for your site. And to do that, you need to know its cold hardiness. You need to know the exposure. Is it a full shade plant or is it a full sun plant? You need to know how big it's going to be, how big it's going to get. How big will my tree get that is in this little small pot of the nursery? How big is that going to get in 15 years? You also want to look at the water requirements. Is it low water, moderate water, or high water? How much water does it need? And then, is it deer resistant? If you live on the west side of Colorado Springs, you definitely want to make sure that you're getting plants that are deer resistant. So, Cold hardiness. Here in Colorado Springs, we are generally a 5. If you live downtown, if you live in the southern part of Colorado Springs, or even the western part of Colorado Springs, I would say zone 5 plants are going to work well for you. If you live up in the Flying Horse, Cordero, Wolf Ranch area, kind of that north and east part of town, that area is actually higher than a lot of Colorado Springs. In that area, you're up at 7,200 feet. And at 7,200 feet, I'm going to tell you a zone 4 is what you should be looking for. Now, where do you see this? Right on the plant tag. It'll show you what the zone range is. So this one is from a 4 to a 9. So it should work anywhere in Colorado Springs. Now, on that tag, you're also going to find the exposure information, how much sunlight does it need, as well as the size, how big it's going to get. Normally, it would also tell you if how much water that plant needs and if it is deer resistant or not. This one didn't have the information on the front of the tag, but it did have something else that I liked, and that was bloom time. When is this plant going to be blooming? At our waterwiseplants.org, we also have all this information there. So you can actually do a search to see what plants meet your criteria. I want low water, I want deer resistant, and I want part sun. Boom. It shows you what plants will meet those criteria, and you can pick which one you like the most. Size and form. When I first start to look at a landscape that I'm getting ready to design, I look for forms, existing forms. This house is a very wide and spreading house, and these plants are also very wide and spreading. Repeating those architectural forms from the house and the landscape automatically creates a cohesion between the two, and they help support one another. When I first start drawing something, I'm actually going to do a perspective, and I'm looking at those forms, and I'm trying to see to how they're going to relate and how I can layer those forms together. When you're picking plants, you also want to limit the palette. You don't want too many things going on in one space. It's going to make it feel very busy. So in this front yard, here we have 1 or 2 of some plants, but really it's like they were going down the row in the garden center and just started grabbing things off the shelf because they looked so pretty. And I get it. I know better to do that, and sometimes I still find myself at home with one of 3 different items just because I thought it was so cool I couldn't leave it there. But when you have a space, you actually want to limit the plant palette and give them room to grow. Some of these plants are way too close to one another. So here's a better example where you have a space and they planted in groups. They picked just a few plants. Let me give you some names here. We have low growth sumac on the left. We have gold mound spirea in the front. And then we have Russian sage in the middle and some miscanthus over on the right. They picked just a few plants and used large groups of them. Don't ever buy just one of anything unless it's meant to be a focal point. Always plants in groups and usually odd numbers. Form and texture. When layering plants, I want to layer plants that have different forms and different textures. So this landscape has some wonderful plants that are low maintenance, low water, and look fantastic throughout the entire year. This first one is a Blonde Ambition Blue Grama. Then we have some baby blue rabbit brush. That's the yellow flower over there on the right. It'll have yellow flowers in August. In the back, we have some Colorado 4 o'clock, and over on the left, we have some Black Knight Spirea. This is what the landscape looks like in spring. We've got some nice forms and textures that are playing off each other, that are layered and repeated through the space. Here's what it looks like come summer. The yellow flowers stand out, the seed heads on the blue grama stand out, and those forms and texture are really what's telling the story here. So it doesn't take a lot of different types of plants. You can pick just a few and have a fantastic landscape. This is what this landscape looks like in fall, and here it is into winter. Form in winter is really important. You don't have that foliage, you don't have those flower colors, so you need something to show you what's going on in that landscape. And here is another picture of that entire landscape from a little bit farther away. Next, we're going to go to color. Color goes beyond just flowers. You want to see how plants are going to a tribute to the landscape throughout the year. So this is a Russian hawthorn at our garden, and this is it in the beginning of summer blooming period. Has beautiful white flowers. But in fall, this is when this plant really shines. It has this beautiful yellow to golden leaf and these persistent red berries that contrast with those leaves in fall and stay on that plant throughout the winter. Birds actually love to eat this berry, but they can't actually eat it until it freezes and thaws several times, which occurs throughout the winter. When you think about color, I also want you to think beyond the flowers. Think of the other things in your landscape. What are the colors of the house? What are the colors of the rock walls that you might use? Also think about grabbing things that have different colors of foliage. So if you did nothing but went to the store and got, 3 green grasses, 2 purple leafed shrubs, and 1 smaller perennial with maybe silver foliage that has pink flowers, that would give you a great landscape just in itself, because you repeated, you have some texture, you have some color in the foliage, and you have some color in the flowers. If you have a border that needs to be deer resistant, this is a good option for you. Here we have a bunch of layers, some layers of plants, which start with a bristlecone pine in the background, a golden currant kind of tucked away back there. And that golden currant in the spring would have been the highlight of this garden because it has these beautiful yellow flowers. And then in the fall turns bright red. In the background on the left, we have some Russian sage, and then along the border, we have some English lavender and some moonshine yarrow. Now, with this combination, even though it is beautiful as it is, the designer in me would want to add a little bit more texture, and I would do that by adding some grasses. So whether it be switchgrass or the blonde ambition that you saw in the previous photo with the rabbit brush, those are the ones that I would look at. We're going a little over on time. Catherine, do we want to keep going? I can finish this up in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think let's keep going. I'm sure that the folks out there are very interested in what you have to say. So absolutely, let's take the time you need.
All right. Okay, so we're going to keep going. If you have to leave, I totally understand. I just get really excited, have a lot of knowledge and experience I always want to share with people. So I apologize if I'm taking longer than we expected this morning. So we're going to go back to this landscape where we talked about the forms. Here are the plants in this landscape. We've got Grollo sumac, thornless cockspur hawthorn, blue avena on the front. Blue avena is a grass that has a very silver blade, and that's why most people use it. But I actually love this other grass a little more. This is Blue Heaven, little blue stem. Here it is in the summer. Here we are in the fall, has this beautiful red, magenta to purple fall color. So that would be the one I would substitute in this case. And then there's some Russian sage in the back, and that's actually the purple plant there behind the tree. So in the summertime, you can see not necessarily a lot of flower color going on, but in fall is really when this garden shines. Look at the fall color on this garden. It's just beautiful. And by giving these plants the space they need to grow, you can see the form and you can also see how healthy they are. So next up, we're going to look at a garden at the Waterwise demonstration garden. This is one of our 5 houses, and I'm going to walk you through what it looks like throughout the season. So here we are in spring, very, very early spring, and we're getting a little bit closer to summer. Now we're in summer, so we're seeing these plants grow and transition, and you can see there's something always blooming, but there's also color and texture at play here. And by the way, that grass in the front of that house is a prestige buffalo grass. So you don't technically have to mow it. Here we are in summer, everything is kind of growing and doing its thing. As we move into a little bit late summer, this is about the end of September is when the buffalo grass is going to start to go dormant, and it gets a beautiful gold color. And here we are until later fall. So this landscape template is available on our website. It's our Easy Care landscape template, and you can see exactly what plants are in there and how to recreate that in your own yard. But that's one where I just like to show how a garden progresses throughout a summer and how those continual, foliage color changes, the textures, the shapes, as well as the flowers all contribute to a polished design and landscape. Now I want to show you our cactus garden at the garden. This is one I worked with Catherine on. So here we have some undaunted muley, which is an amazing, amazing ornamental grass that just creates this pink fluff of a flower. And in the springtime, it looks like this, but as it blooms, it just becomes this amazing pink cloud. In the front, we have some prairie zinnia. This is a native ground cover that you can find around here. In the back, we have this pencil cholla. So we have this really soft, pink, fluffy cloud next to this really structured and sharp cholla. Contrasting things is really fun, a fun thing you can do with texture. In the back, we have this amazing perennial called a windwalker, royal red salvia. Hummingbirds love this plant. And in the front, we have some opuntia, some more native cacti that you're going to find in the area. So here we are in the summer, and then this is it actually backlit. When designing your space, think about that time of use. When are you going to use it? And maybe you can do some really advanced things like creating drama by choosing plants when the sun is going down at night, just creates this amazing image. And this next photo, this is the same garden in wintertime. So even though there's not a lot of foliage color going on here, the texture this garden has is just amazing. Here's another view of the cactus garden with some of the same plants that we've seen already. There's a Blackfoot daisy, which is another native perennial, some partridge feather, and more of the undaunted muley. But here it is in springtime, and you can see the main plant in spring is going to be a lot of the opuntias that we have in their flowers. And as this garden progresses, it just changes the feeling of it completely. So you can do any style of gardening that you want. You can find plants that are going to work for you, that are going to be low water and are going to help you have a fantastic landscape. One of the best places to look for plant resources is going to be our website, which is waterwiseplants.org. This is a website we created and has our experiences built into it. You're also welcome to come by the demonstration garden. It is open. Please follow all of the proper safety precautions that are currently set. But it is a place that you could go and stroll around and look at plants. It's beautiful right now. We have more classes coming up, and there's also some great fact sheets on our website. And then CSU, Colorado State University, they also have amazing extension fact sheets on, soil types, soil amendments, or vegetable gardening. So it's another great resource for you. And then lastly, local nurseries and landscape professionals are always a great source of knowledge that can help you answer some of your questions. So with that, let's go ahead and go to questions one more time, Catherine, and let's see how many of those we can work through and help people.
Okay, sounds good. One question we got, sorry, I was answering a few that were more specific to certain individuals. Okay, we have got a few thank yous, and one person said, what is the specific website for design? I did post a link on the Q&A session for the templates from the Waterwise neighborhood, and I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to promote as links for design help, and I have showed your video now.
Yeah, so, well, one, this presentation we're hoping to make available all of you. We're going to try to send it out by email. We are all horticulturalists, so they're going down this path of kind of advanced technology is new for us, and it's something that we're going to work through, but we're going to try to send you this presentation so you actually can review those plants or points that we talked about throughout it. Beyond that, I would say look for inspiration for places like Pinterest or our website. Find something you really like and copy it. I think that's the easiest way to help you master kind of an area at a time.
Okay, sounds great. And then there's a question here that says, can we walk through the demonstration garden now, or is it closed? And I'm actually not sure of the answer to that. Are you, Lisa, with our updated policies?
So my understanding is it's still open. I have seen people walk through there in the last couple weeks when I've kind of driven by. But I will say, you know, it's all of your own kind of precautions, right? So if it's not an essential need for you, then the answer there would be, you know, it's really something that you're gonna want to decide. If that's something you want to risk. But the parking lot is open. It is not, there's nothing blockading it at the moment.
Okay, and we should probably mention that we will have our latest information posted on our website. So if there are changes or update to that statement, please check csu.org before you make the trip.
Yes, that's probably the best thing to do is take a look at our website and just watch that for updates.
Okay, sounds good. And then we have one, oops, we maybe have a few more.
How about this?
Okay.
Let me just say to all of you that attended that need to take off, I completely understand. Thank you so much for your time and attention. We hope it went pretty well. This is our first webinar, and it was really tricky to try to get this set up. So if you have any suggestions on what we can do to make it better, please let us know. We're going to try to improve with each one that we do. Our next one is actually next week, and it's on trees. It's a great class on trees. And Catherine, I believe you're teaching that one. So come back. Come back to us. Let us share our information with you, even though we can't meet with you in person.
Okay, so that sounds great, Lisa. So maybe what I would suggest is if we go ahead and end the formal portion of the webinar now, that we do have a few more questions if you want to address those either continuing on or if you want to just do that through chat. They are related to the topic that you're speaking about, so we could certainly take maybe 3 more if you want to.
Let's go ahead and take 3 more, and then Catherine, if we can, let's try to get the other ones through chat after we end. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do 3 more. I do think we've answered quite a few through chat, so that is worth taking a look to participants as well. Okay, so these are the last 3. What is the best use for this? And I'm going to show to your video if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. This is Lisa again. The question is from Sophie, and she says, what is the best use for the small space between my house's foundation and the perennial garden?
Okay, what is the best use for the space between my foundation and my perennial garden?
That's right.
Well, first, what I would say is more than anything, make sure you have good positive drainage away from your foundation. You want at least a 2 to 3% grade. So if you don't have that, then the best use of that would be to try to figure out how to get proper drainage away from your house. If you do have positive grade or you have positive draining away from your house, then in that space you have some options. Sometimes right off the back of the house, that's where I like to put a patio. I find that that's just really convenient being right there. If my house has some windows, that might be a good place to put some flowering shrubs. If you have a beautiful perennial garden, then you might want something that's just lower maintenance. So things like shrubs or ornamental grasses is where I would go. But I wouldn't plant any trees in that space. It's probably too close to the house. So maybe not even shrubs more than, 4 or 5 feet tall as well.
Okay, sounds great. And then our second question is, I'm going to combine 2 from Kathy, and she says, how do you layer in groups and how do you create combinations that vary in texture and color that work well together?
Okay, so let's start with how do you layer in groups? And I'm going to draw this. So if I'm layering in groups. Can we see that? Yes. Okay.
Yep, you can see that.
So I'm going to pretend that I have a patio space. We're going to say we have a beautiful patio space here. And then we have a fence kind of back here. And this fence is going to go this way. Dink, 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 dink. And it's going to go this way, something like that. So there's our fence, here's our patio, and we want to start to create a layering. Well, I'm gonna pretend a few more things. I'm gonna pretend that that way is west, and I wanna be on this patio in the afternoon, and I need some shade. So that function is going to be where I begin, and I'm going to start by creating a tree that's going to come into this space. Ding, 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 ding. And this tree is going to give me some shade in the afternoon when I want to use that patio. Now, in the background, because I want to layer, I'm going to start by using some larger shrubs, and I'm just going to begin by drawing some boxes, right? Because I don't know what the shrub is that I want. I just want it to kind of fill this section. And now I'm going to play off of scale. So if I have this much of a shrub that's kind of creating a block of color here, then I'm going to create another block of color to offset that kind of across that front. So I have a background plant, I have a midground plant, I have a foreground plant, and this might be, you know, some wonderful perennials, something like a salvia. Salvia is a good plant if you have deer, will take sun, and will take part shade conditions for the most part. So maybe there's kind of this grouping of salvia. And I know this is going to be a medium texture plant. And I know that this shrub in the backyard, because it's going to read as this big plaque, will probably read as a medium texture plant as well. So I want to add something fine. And to do that, I'm going to add some grasses. So these grasses are just going to kind of play right across the middle of this planting bed that I have. And let's say when I'm sitting out there, I want to play to all my senses. So maybe I'm actually going to install a fountain, which is just a pot that, you know, trickles water over the top. Maybe that's a fountain or a basalt stick. So something in there that kind of gives some additional senses and feeling. And now as I continue to move around this space, I'm going to just continue to just draw in some forms. So here's kind of a plant there. It's going to peek around. I'm going to repeat that plant over here just to give it some balance to the space. And now I'm just going to fill it in. I'm going to use detailed plants right next to my patio, but as I get farther away, so as I move away from this patio, I'm going to get larger plants that fill in the space that don't require maintenance, so that my maintenance can really be concentrated right where I plan on using the space. And I'm just going to start to draw in what these shapes, what the kind of the textures, forms, and size of these plants are that I want to grow in here. And then later I'm going to come back and actually assign the plants. So this is just how I do it. I do it by using those forms. I do it by figuring out textures and layering forms and textures. And then I actually assign the plant to it at the end. I find that for me, that's the best way that I ensure that I'm hitting some of those more important features rather than just looking at the flower color of the plant.
Okay, that's really cool. I wish I could draw like that. And then this would be our last question from Bethany, and she says, "Is Kentucky bluegrass the only grass that's good for kids? It seems so high cost for watering." And just so you know, Lisa, I did put a link in the Q&A to our choosing the best grass video, as well as a link to the site where you can get our grass comparisons chart. But how do you resolve that when you need a high traffic grass, but if you put that everywhere, you are going to really have a pretty substantial water bill on a regular basis?
Right. So there I go to kind of that practical turf area scenario. I do feel Kentucky bluegrass is the best grass when you have kids or pets that are going to be continually playing in that space. It's going to recuperate the best from all that traffic that you get, and it actually can become drought stressed. It can go into kind of a hibernation, and then when you water it later, it'll come back. There are other grasses that will take that traffic but may not have that survivalism mechanism, which I really appreciate about Kentucky bluegrass, and it's part of why I think it's a really good grass for that situation. So when you do practical space, do it in that 600 square feet to 1,000 square feet. Make sure you amend the soil ahead of time. It's going to help save about 25% of the water if you do that. Aerate it in the spring. And make sure that when you are watering that you're doing efficient irrigation techniques, and we have all sorts of information on the irrigation side of it as well. So how long should you run your sprinklers for? How do you cycle and soak to make sure the water is moving through the soil and not just moving off the soil as runoff? So if you can dial in your irrigation efficiency, have a smaller area of grass where you use soil amendments and it's semi-level. So again, that helps with the irrigation efficiency. Then the cost to irrigate that space is actually only about 14 cents per square foot for the entire summer. So where you have 2,000 square feet, that's where it's going to get expensive. If you have 600 to 1,000 square feet, it's going to be much more economical.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I think that concludes our first webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you, Lisa. I always appreciate hearing your words of wisdom, and through knowing you, my landscape definitely looks better than it would have otherwise. So thank you all very much. Once again, if you have any last suggestions for us to make these webinars more effective for you and to help you, please put those in the Q&A box. And we will offer our next webinar, which is on planting trees for future generations, next week. So please go ahead and register for that one if you'd like to learn about that topic. Any closing comments, Lisa?
I don't. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was worth your time. And if you have more questions, let us know. This is what we love to do. We love to help people with the knowledge and experience that we have. And we just want to make Colorado Springs a beautiful place to live. So thank you very much.
All right. Have a great weekend.
You too, everyone.